All right. Hey, Lori, how's it going today?
It's good, Chad. How are you doing? Hi, everyone.
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about the Apple event. And that's really kind of for everybody. That's what we're going to focus on today. Conversation, no idea where it's going to go. But we want to talk about what everybody's talking about, which is Apple's kind of AI announcements and just kind of make the connections to what it could potentially mean and how it's going to show up in use. So just if you're just tuning in, that's kind of what's on tap for today. And I know a lot of people have been talking about it. So I was kind of surprised. If I'm really honest, I'm kind of surprised the announcement wasn't larger.
Oh, interesting. Well, and just to set the context, right? WWDC, Worldwide Developer Conference at Apple, is right where we get to hear always about what is going to be coming up in the next year of technology. It's been for 15 years, the preeminent conference for technologists to
kind of been that long?
I believe so.
Oof.
Yeah. The age Chad, not me, just Chad.
Yeah, just me.
Something like that. It's been a while. But yeah, it is. That's where us technologists, we get all excited because they start talking about the things that are, on their plate, what's coming up, what they kind of see. So it does ultimately give shape. Some of the years have been incredible, like the year the iPhone came out, right? And then other years have been duds. Like I think when they went from 13 to 14 on iPhone, it wasn't that great. But this year there were some really exciting announcements. And I think the one that really stood out for me was Apple talking about how it's going to partner with OpenAI for AI. Is that what you were referring to when you said you thought?
So I mean, there were people that said that, hey, it was kind of in the background, like we think Apple's going to partner with OpenAI, and there were conversations around that, and you start to think, I mean, I guess I'm glad they owned it, but if you think about Apple has that walled garden appeal, right? Like they're very much all about protecting people's data, protecting their privacy. And you have, at this event, you've got the number I saw, and don't hold me to it, anybody, but the number I saw was like over 800,000 people were tuning into this event. And I don't know, I guess maybe because I had higher expectations, it was more what they didn't say that surprised me, because with that partnership with OpenAI, there was some part where they were like, hey, yeah, some things will happen on device and others will have to go to the cloud for processing. But it wasn't real clear, like, what's going to Apple's black box, what's going to OpenAI, and what does that mean for the data? And then that brings in the whole, thing around trust. Do you trust, because Apple, to like the killer app would be that personal assistant that has access to all of your stuff and can really start to help you make sense of the insanity that many people feel is their lives. So, but then you have, do you want OpenAI to have access to that? And I just don't think they explain that really, really well yet. I mean, maybe I missed it, but it just to me felt like, where is all my data going?
Well, I mean, I definitely think they got some loud critics on that point of, just kind of set the context, right? Apple and Microsoft have been at war for a long time about, do you have an open source, which is Microsoft's idea, Google's idea, right? Of like, no, you let the community build, or Apple is where everything, as Chad mentioned, like has boundaries, which means that it's got a closed system. For those who don't know, you don't really get viruses or anything like that on Apple's, because there are really strict standards about what can be submitted to the platform and what can't. So that closedness of Apple has always led to people feeling more secure with their data and safety. Even though the company has it, it's not as accessible as it is when you have an open source community. So I got that too, that when they were talking about how the data exchange is gonna happen, one, I actually think it's amazing for mankind, right? Like if we are at a pivotal point in time with technology, let's actually partner up so that we can get the technology to a place to just start automating and taking care of some of the stuff that humans don't want to do, right? And give us the opportunity to start thinking bigger. But it did, to me as well, seem as if there was a little wishy-washy of how that data transfer is going to happen. But I don't know if that is good or bad, because it might be good that they're sharing what their intentions are to build for the community, and they might not know. I mean, you and I know in development, we don't know the answers a lot of times, right? You know,
Yeah,
the
that's
problem
true.
is
That's
solved and you
fair.
have it like laid out, which is also introducing a different way of thinking.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. We're at a point, the tech's moving so fast that I think a lot of people, there was a meme I saw where it was like, when everybody's digging for gold, sell shovels. And it was in reference to Nvidia selling all of the chips to, the Microsoft, Google, OpenAI. And which is why they're, a $3 trillion, I think it's over $3 trillion valuation at this point. But you think about, where is it going to go? I don't know. Just like we're saying, nobody has all the answers at this point, right? There's certain kind of trends that you see. Like people agree that, okay, we're going to be able to automate a lot of things. We're going to be able to integrate AI in almost any profession that's out there. I was at the dentist this morning, and they actually were looking at a potential program that would apply AI to reviewing dental x-rays
I
for
love that.
better diagnosis of problems. And I was just like, that wasn't even one that had been on my radar. And here I am talking to my dental hygienist about it. And part of it was because she said, well, I have an Apple phone. And so I'm going to get really comfortable with the tech because it's going to be built into the phone and I don't really have to do much with it. Now that concerned me a little bit because it was like, hey, here's a new toy, but you don't really understand how the toy works or how to maximize enjoyment with the toy or effectiveness of the toy. And it made me start to wonder if, even though we're excited by all this stuff that Apple's going to do and it being, ChatGPT 4.0 being integrated into Siri, are we over equipping people without giving them, it's kind of like Cliff Notes. Are we just giving everybody the Cliff Notes version to life, or are we going to actually ask some people to read Shakespeare? Right. You know what I mean?
I love that thinking. And yeah, I think we want both, right? One, I can share with you feedback that I've gotten from, just some of the research that I've done from leaders is that, right, they hate when the AI stuff shows up on Google and they're like, I just want my answers. And this is very simplistic, right? Like leaders who aren't technologists are like, hey, why? I just want the answer. I don't want to have to think that.
I don't want to think.
They don't want to think. So there is that idea of, if you start to see and use, you actually will learn, which actually goes along very much with Apple's philosophy of how they release things out. If you notice, they don't give directions. They actually spend more money on their marketing to show you what a swipe might be. Like, remember when we had to learn what, swipe to open or
Right.
lift up to open? Like, we actually had to learn that, and there weren't directions. Apple did commercials about them. So I feel like there's a little bit of an advancement of society and people being able to get the results of it. But there is this other part where there's a call for leaders to read Shakespeare, to use your example of where I write. If some people understand, and here's what's great, is you don't have to understand how the technology works anymore. That's what's beautiful about AI, is it's not the actual nuts and bolts like it used to be. Chad and I can both say that from being in the industry for so long, for a couple of decades. But we do need leaders and people who are thinking a little bit differently, that understand that automation is like one little part of what is possible. And we need leaders who are thinking beyond just automating processes, right? So I think that we all, like, there's this call that with, I think, ChatGPT being just given to everybody and everybody using it, that we will hopefully accelerate that understanding of people to say, oh, wait, like, it's like having my own research team or my own design team in my phone that I didn't have before. So I think it's a little of both.
And I'm with you. I think it's a lot of the, some of the things that were old still apply, right? Garbage in, garbage out. Before, we always used to use that when we were talking about data, right? You had crap data, you get crap results. I honestly think we're going to get to a point where it's going to be more about the quality of your thought process, the quality of your ability to think, rationalize, be creative, be empathetic, the caliber of, I'd have to look up the word to make sure I'm using it right, but the caliber of your character, the caliber of your presentation of self, the way you engage. I think that's going to become extremely important. But what worries me is those individuals that are like, well, I don't want to have to think. So get into practical application for a leader, right? What's the one thing we hear all the time? I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time to do that. I don't have enough time to do this. And one of the things that I saw that they're doing with the Apple stuff is that reprioritization, resurface important messages or important things that come through your data set, your phone, your email, whatever it is.
Your inbox and stuff. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, like that.
For you, I love that.
I'm looking through just to give a shout out and kudos. I am currently looking at is it Michael Spencer's? I believe it's Michael Spencer's Substack, which is AI Supremacy. I'll put it in the show notes for anybody, but it's a great summary of everything that went on. I watched it. Somehow he found pictures of somebody next to Sam Altman doing selfies and stuff. But I mean, it's a cool scroll. But there was one thing in here where he talked about, he captured it nicely that it's going to be able to resurface important topics. And it made me start thinking, like, I spent a lot of time with leaders helping them understand how to identify what is important, what's urgent. What's not important, what's not urgent. I have a tendency to default to the Eisenhower Matrix, 4 quadrants. As I look at things, the Eisenhower Matrix, it shows up in Covey's work a lot. So it's like, axis is urgent, a degree of urgency and degree of importance. So your y-axis is like importance and your x-axis is urgency. Quadrant 1 is things that are urgent, time sensitive, and also important. And then you have things that are urgent but not important. That's quadrant 2. Then you have important but not urgent. That's quadrant 3. And then things that aren't important and aren't urgent, which are quadrant 4. Depending on who you're talking to, they'll use different phrases, but like quadrant 4, things you need to get rid of. Quadrant 3 are things that you should delegate. Quadrant 2, that important but not urgent, are things you should schedule. And then quadrant 1, important and urgent, are things you need to take care of. They're things that only you can handle. And it requires some analysis and honestly some connection to what is your objective, not just from a business standpoint. I know you and I are both big on, what's your purpose? Work may not be your purpose, or what you're doing may not be helping you achieve your purpose. It's a step in that direction. And so when we say urgent and important, we're talking about those things that are going to get you closer to your goal, whatever that may be, right? And so you really are doing some internal reflection. And so now I get worried that, okay, I'm going to rely on this AI to say, hey, this is a really important topic and you need to address it. And then I turn around, and if I really stop and think about it, instead of just respond, I go, no, you're wrong. That's not for me. That's not it. Like, do we get to a point where we stop that critical analysis of our self-realization plans? Like, what is our goal? Because if we're, as leaders, if we're not working that way, we can't lead that way. And I just get worried that convenience, because let's be honest. We live in a society of the more convenient, the more I will pay for it.
It's totally right. Like, it is. But I don't know. I mean, just to not be the pessimist, but isn't that already going on? Like, I, spent 5 years at a Fortune 500, and I can tell you there are people who literally go through and spend time everything equally as if it's all the top priority. So
because then it goes back to critical thought, though.
Thinking actually happening. And is there at least the possibility now of raising some things up to help you prioritize? Because I'm a firm believer of priority lists are great as long as they're moving. Right?
Yeah, they have to have motion.
Time and time again, where leaders are like, that's it. This is our quarterly or yearly thing, and it's not going to move. Only you discover, like, I'll give an example. I was doing a Salesforce implementation, an upgrade, and we had to look at data sets. And this was probably a 2 or 3 year project. And what was listed as the priority was like, great, we're all on that. Well, 3 months in, we discovered that the data was a mess, right? So we just had to go back and parse through it. And that's really tough, deep, critical thinking work. Right. But when we went back to the priority list, that wouldn't change. And that the question from leaders was, well, so is it on track, for this quarter or not? And often what I found is that it was like, well, if you want us to just get something out, yes, it's on track. We can do that, but the data is going to be wrong, but it's not going to be done right. So you're not going to get the value out of it. And that question was really, really hard for a leadership team to be able to make the decision of like, okay, we're going to change that priority list to say this quarter is now update on data, like a clear, picture, because that understanding of the technology and what that took wasn't there by sales and marketing and accounting and operations, right? So to bring it back to the email thing, I think that the helping of priorities might be a time saver, because it might give you the freedom to be like, I didn't respond to something that was not urgent. And that's okay if that sits and it's not a 24-hour response, because it's honestly, it shouldn't have even been an email. It should have been a quick Slack message of, what do you think of this? And that's it. That's where I see the possibility of if it can help you prioritize, and then you're committed to that critical thinking, it could actually open up a lot of possibilities for leaders to free up.
I can see where you're going. Here's my concern. You and I are both old enough, not that I'm throwing either one of us under the bus, but you and I are both old enough to remember back in the day when, if I were to ask you, hey, what is so-and-so's phone number? You could rattle it off. And what's so-and-so's phone number? And you knew it, right? Nobody knows anybody's phone numbers anymore today, because we rely on the tech to be our memory. So that's one thing. So let's go a step further. I can remember doing sales calls where I had, real maps that I was looking at, figuring out how I was going to get across LA, or how I was going to get through, Oklahoma City, or whatever it was. And today I can barely tell you how to get out of my neighborhood unless the GPS is on, right? So we
past the red barn, past the second cell tower.
Yeah, out here, that's definitely what it is. Go past the rotted out trailer. Anyway, but you get to a point where you start to rely on the tech so much that it removes. Now, some would say it removes the need to think about that. Others would say it frees up the cycles to think about other things. I just worry that we get to a point, because I've seen it with some of the teams and leaders that we've trained and worked with. They start to give up. What's the word I would use? Agency. They give up themselves a little bit in over reliance on the tech. So now something happens. Wi-Fi goes down. Like, I'm in an area where if you don't have Wi-Fi calling, you're not making calls. So Wi-Fi goes down. You're cut off from the world. The tech doesn't work. I have to wait until, now I'm over exaggerating, but I have to wait until it comes back on so I can actually leave my house to go find the grocery store. I'm over exaggerating a little bit, but you go back to the prioritization stuff. If I'm trusting, and that's really what it comes down to, is trust. Do I trust the tech? Do I trust the motivations of the individuals that are putting the tech out there, and or what the tech can do? What am I sacrificing? And if I'm sacrificing, if I choose to trust the tech to tell me what's important, then am I giving up, or am I sacrificing, or am I dulling the sharpness of my critical thinking, analysis, and my ultimate purpose realization? Right? Am I sacrificing a piece of that agency? Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but I feel like that's a big fat no. Like, you're a human being. You are using critical thinking all the time. I do think there's a scenario where, with the hierarchical kind of industrial management, meaning the leader says something, you do it. Like, we've literally trained, teams and people and systems to only do what the boss says. So we've actually already removed a lot of that critical thinking. So I think that the critical thinking doesn't go away in your life. Like, if your Wi-Fi went down, I'm very confident that you could go and find a grocery store. Like, I think me, Chad.
I could pull that off. Yes.
Right. But the question is where do we get the pleasure from? We get value back when we use that critical thinking, right? So the question, I agree with you on the trust, but I don't think that it would stop critical thinking. I would just think what's going to happen naturally in your brain is the idea of fairness. Like, is this worth my time to spend my critical thinking here? Oh, this person's going to come in and poo-poo it anyways, or say yay or nay. Like, I'm not going to do anything till I get their approval anyways. So I'm not going to spend it there. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out, how do I help create a new bike trail in, Lone Tree, Colorado, right? Like, that's where I'm going to put my energy. But the critical thinking won't go away. The question is can we as leaders, and, by Apple and Microsoft partnering up, are we throwing it to the community to say, hey, let's let the community get some of this basic stuff together, the positive and the negative, so that we might be able to actually bring critical thinking back in, rather than just, I do what my boss says or doesn't say, and I don't do more than what my role description is.
So, okay. So, but now I'll go back to, so if we're specifically talking about critical thinking, and there's a lot that goes into critical thinking, right? There's a lot of ways you can peel that back to layers on that. If you look at just specifically in business, the number of times I've run into, I don't want to say inability, but not cognitively engaged enough to apply critical thinking. And they just default to what's next? What have I been told to do? What do I got? The industrial kind of mindset. If AI is supposed to increase the need for the human skills, we have to be careful at where we're leveraging the AI, and really, I think, understand what we're giving up. Example, kind of in line, would be, and you and I both remember this, because we were on the forefront of developing apps when they decided that they wanted the phone to be able to tell systems where you were. And there was a huge pushback on, they don't need to know where I am. I know that's me. They don't need to know where I am, until they realized that if you didn't tell them where you were, your GPS wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to recommend good Italian restaurants. It wasn't going to do all these other things that you really wanted it to do. So you hit this tipping point where the convenience and the accessibility to the tech overrode your own desire for privacy. And now people don't very rarely even take a second thought about the fact that you are being tracked 24/7 if you have or are in any device that's connected to, GPS of any kind. And so now it's like, no, whatever. Because most people say, well, I don't care if they know where I am or what I'm doing.
Well,
okay, we gave that up. So what are we giving up?
That feels to me like a fair exchange, right? Like something that came up, and like the idea that if somebody's going to prioritize my emails for me, I hate emails. Like, I'm all like Slack text. That's it. That's just my personal preference. But if someone's going to be like, hey, you didn't respond to, this message, and the deadline here says May 30th. Right. Like,
all right. So you're talking about, so now we're talking about depth of prioritization.
Depth of prioritization.
Depth of prioritization. So if that's all it's doing, if that's all it's going to do, hey, birthday coming up 3 days from now, anniversary coming up, reminder, you really need to be aware of this, or you haven't responded to this email, or you in a meeting, let's even keep going and say it's tapped into our meetings or transcripts and says you made this commitment and you haven't sent that email, or it's going to be more of that assistant, that true assistant piece, but it's not going to tell me, hey, this is more urgent and important for you. That's a different depth, in my opinion. I don't think we're far away, but I think it's different depth.
I agree with you. We're not far away, but I think that's what's kind of exciting about putting it out to the community is right. Like, we're still human beings who, I think people are inherently good, and right, they want to do what's best. So if we create the opportunity for use cases, user testing, which I'm a big believer of, right, then we're going to more quickly get to, whoa, we're comfortable with this right now, but we're not comfortable going here. I'm not comfortable with you prioritizing this over that. I'm going to go with deadlines first. And those use cases are what the big tech companies are going to be building their software around, right? But if we just leave it up to a few minds in, really large companies that have shareholders that are really driving their priorities, right? Is that any better than you or I getting to decide what we consider the depth or not? And for some people, they don't, like you and I love the tech, right? And we love humans. So we're concerned about that, but some people aren't. Some people are like, I want fast, easy, so I can do whatever it takes for me to get into nature or go spend time with my kids, right? So I think, yeah, I think I'm a believer in the community, right? Like Chad and I have this idea of the collective here. And if you look around, you're going to start seeing that people are really into, hey, it's not about one company working alone. It's not about one person being alone, rather it's about putting it out to the community to see what we as humans, as a group, really want.
So, okay. And so then if we think about it, and it's going to be tied in to all of these things, there was one thing, and I'm still on the fence about this, but like one of the things they talked about was summarizing notes, right? And being able to do that, or automated emoji recommendations. I think they called it Genmoji or something like that. Like some of these things were a little, that's why I said at the beginning, I felt like it fell a little flat. Like there's a big nugget there about OpenAI and Apple together, and what does that mean for the data? And I think that needs exploration. There's other individuals out there who are going hardline on it and saying, well, if that happens, then certain devices aren't going to be allowed in certain companies because it's a data security breach. I'm not going down that road. But when you look at everything that was in there, Apple has always been very good at making really complex impacts come in soft, right? Like all of the changes in the UI, like, hey, it's okay. You can give me notifications that vibrate the phone and it'll create a dopamine release. And then all of a sudden I'm addicted to the phone and I didn't realize it. Like they've been really good at that. My concern is now let's look at the combination of that optimized user experience and interface combined with Gen AI that's going to be making these recommendations. We've seen attention spans go down as a result of this. I honestly believe there has been a reduction in the majority of individuals willing to or knowing how to do true deep thinking. And so now the question becomes, well, what does this mean? Does it free us up to do what you're talking about? And people will then re-engage those things they haven't been using in business for other reasons, right? Or is there some other unintended consequence? And that was kind of, because there wasn't some big wow in the Apple announcement, that was kind of where I ended up, was like, all right, well, what does this really mean? And what are the outcomes? What's the result of these decisions? Because maybe it wasn't meant to be a big bang. Maybe it was like, hey, we're just going to slowly slide this into everything. And
you're being a Debbie Downer, dude. I'm just going to call it out. Like, I thought there was a big wow. The idea of Apple and Microsoft, right, who now owns OpenAI, or majority of it, that is huge. That is literally the introduction of how we do work differently, right? You have two strong competitors who are saying, you know what, for the sake of the community, we're actually going to come together because we feel like instead of worrying about going to me or you, we're going to kind of give up that ego. I'm sure the shareholders are going to be scared in the next quarter, 2 quarters, but it's going to create a lot more opportunity because you're going to have more powerhouse thinking working together and actually having checks and balances. Whereas right now, we're really leaning on the tech companies. Apple's a good example. We lean on them to tell us what is going to be coming next, or companies like Salesforce, what's going to be coming next, right? Whereas now when you create it to a community, it starts getting, ideally, right, the things that are important to actual real people will start bubbling up because those are the scenarios that are going to be used. Right? Think about how Apple does it. Apple is a great example of a collective where they said, hey, let's just bring everyone together and we'll provide Amazon. They'll provide a platform where you can run your own business, but yes, you're directly competing with somebody else, but you also have access to more people. And now they've been able to dial it in to where I can order something because they can see the trends of what's really popular for people. And I can have it on my doorstep in 3 hours. Which is amazing to me.
Okay, but that's a combination. So you and I both are close to finishing, if we haven't finished, Song of Significance by Seth Godin, right?
Yes.
And so in that book, he points to Amazon as one of the examples of one of the perfect industrialized companies where productivity is the key metric that they are doubling down on, right? And we both believe that to some extent that's going to have to change. Hence the idea of the collective, and we want to go kind of approach it from a different standpoint. So what, if I'm hearing you, what you're saying is that Amazon's kind of doing both. They're using the industrial mindset, which may make working for Amazon not so awesome, depending on what level you're at, versus the impact of bringing together a wide group of individuals that can run businesses, provide services, and hard goods to a much larger community. So it's kind of a combination then, from if I'm hearing you.
And it's funny because if you think about it from my perspective, when Amazon came out as a bookstore or music CDs, right? Like we were like, what's this technology betting so much on it? But we didn't see the creative power of the community. So I think Amazon really started as a creative collective. I think where they've turn now, and if you ask my daughter, she thinks they're evil, because you can't literally every minute of you, from the turn you take as a driver to what your break is, like every second is tracked. And as human beings, like that just doesn't feel good, right? We don't have autonomy. And so that is the actual production side, and the things they're measuring, they've actually gone way back to the industrial complex or industrial management. And I think that it's going to have to shift at some point, right? Because people are like starting to be like, this is BS. I'm not doing that. But then you look at, they also still have the gig economy where you can pick up a few hours, and, you can pick up 10 hours easily and pick how much you want to work or don't work. So I do think the measurements that Amazon is using is crazy industrial management, right? I don't think
that may help them. But that may actually help them into this next version of work, because you've put in robotics, which they've been a big user of robotics. My brother worked for a company that designed some of those warehouse robots. And so now what they've done is they've sliced every job in so thin, it becomes easier to tell an AI enhanced robot what to do. So now all of that stuff becomes potentially roboticized. And as a result, then individuals don't have to deal with that. Which, okay, we can get into the philosophical discussion. I find it hysterical that your daughter, oh no, not Amazon. When we were growing up, it was all like, hey, check this out. Amazon just got this to my door in 2 or 3 hours. And now there's bigger thinking around it. And I think it's that impact of, like, again, nobody has all the answers. And I don't think anybody has any company is in shape. Any of these big companies are in the shape to just say, hey, this is our approach. I think the context of that conversation is like, hey, for warehousing or, logistics, this is our context and our approach. It's more industrialized. When it comes to connecting individuals and building a true commerce platform that connects individuals, this collective is more of our context and our approach. So you get into a situation, and maybe Apple's going to be doing the same thing, that their approach to what the future of work looks like will really depend on the context of the conversation or area you're looking at.
Well, I love that. And I 100% agree with you. And I think that's when we talked about complex thinking, like that's where we as business leaders and technology leaders need to be thinking about, what if some of the stuff that we do, that we've, sliced down to minute little pieces that a human being just doesn't enjoy. I mean, we see this in the workplace, right? The quiet quitting. Some people are just miserable. It feels, the word soul sucking comes out a lot.
Yeah.
Like, so what if we automate those? What the call then leaves is for leaders to be thinking about, well, gosh, if I did automate 50% of my employees' job, what else could I really use their bigger complex thinking for, and start creating bigger opportunities, bigger thinking, like, hey, we have a stronger purpose than just making money. That's what I think the call is. And that's to bring it back to WWDC. I think that was a really big wow for Microsoft and Apple to be saying, hey, we're gonna quit the scarcity model of it's me or you, and we're gonna say, hey, let's actually work together, because working together is going to open more opportunities for everybody to start changing their thinking. I'm going to be the ever optimist, and that's what I'm going with, Chad. I'm excited about it. It's like partnerism, and
you are the ever optimist. Absolutely. And I love the conversation. I think there's a lot of things that there's there to unpack, right? A lot of things, especially around, I mean, the optimistic side of you. I didn't even see that. I didn't see that. So I'll thank you for that, right? I'll thank you for that. But there's definitely a lot there to unpack, which I think we can jump into on other episodes. Does that sound fair?
Sounds good.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Well, welcome and thank you for being at the playground. We will see you soon.